Hey there. Welcome back to Nothing But Anime. It's time for part 10 of our What If Deku Had Powerful Weapon Quirk series. If you're having fun with the content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Let's jump right in and see what happens next. The press conference was swiftly put together and scheduled for Saturday, the day after the practical exam. Shoyuta picked at his tie, the formal wear, feeling supremely uncomfortable. Did we really have to dress up for this? I feel like my hero costume would have been perfectly fine after a quick wash. Netsu sighed, riding on Vlad's shoulder. In a crisis like this, it is best to appear professional. Your hero costume, even if cleaned, is far from that. I am aware that you are uncomfortable, but it is a necessary evil. Shoyuta groaned, before standing upright. Fair enough. Where's the blonde buffoon? Vlad grunted. Last I checked, he was laid up in the infirmary. The ice spike from the kid did a number on him, and he's been coughing up blood ever since. Even bulking up puts him in extreme pain. He doesn't have the strength for something like this. Shoyuta swore under his breath. He has a bad habit of not being available when he's actually needed. Doesn't he? Netsu hummed. Unfortunate but workable. We must simply be careful with how we respond. Shoyuta sighed and walked towards the door. Let's just get this over with so I can check on Yaoyorozu. He opened the door, and the three heroes were immediately bombarded with a flood of questions from the reporters sitting below the stage. They ignored the crowd as they made their way to their designated seats. Netsu sat in the middle of the long table, with Shoyuta on his right and Vlad on his left. After a few more seconds of shouting, the principal raised his paw, and the crowd fell silent. I must request that you save your questions until after we finish explaining. Miraculously, the crowd stayed silent, and the mammal nodded, glancing around the room. As I'm sure you've all heard, one of our hero course students attacked another student, and two of his teachers yesterday during a final exam. What you probably have not heard is that the student in question was Todoroki Shudo. Murmurs rose up, and Shoyuta flashed his quirk to silence them. Netsu continued. I will preface this by saying that, due to our focus on the motions of the League of Villains, we made a gross error and did not look deeper into the mental health of our students. I assure you, we will be giving this issue much more attention going forward. Suddenly, the ground rumbled, and the entire conference hall was suddenly covered in a thick layer of ice, holding everyone in place. As the reporters and heroes struggled, a familiar voice rang out. Really? Because from what I've experienced, heroes don't actually care for their masterpieces. They only care about how much damage we can do. Shoyuta scowled as Todoroki strode through the now obliterated doors at the back of the room. Unfortunately, before he could do anything, the teen waved his right hand, and another thick layer of ice covered his body, solidly trapping him in place. Kid, what the hell are you doing? Todoroki strode forward, his right hand wreathed in flames. The ice covering the lenses of the reporters' cameras melted as the teen passed, and Todoroki stopped in the center of the room, with every camera trained on him. Well, I did say that our conversation deserved a larger audience. Who better than a crowd of reporters to ensure the truth gets out? The vultures muttered to each other, and one brave reporter asked, what truth? Todoroki smirked evilly. Why, the truth about Endeavor. Dabi jumped. What the hell? Shudo continued. You may protest. Oh, but Endeavor is the number 2 hero. What possible secrets could he hide? Many. The truth is far scarier than the lies you feed yourselves to stay content. You've all seen my scar. I've been to many a gala where at least 10 people would comment on it. But not once did anyone ever ask how I got it. If they had, maybe the situation could have been resolved more peacefully. But it's too late now. Dabi couldn't help but let a grin slip onto his face. No way, this can't actually be happening. Shudo turned to face the cameras and crossed his arms behind his back. Where to begin? Well, I suppose it's only fair to start at the earliest point I can think of, my mother. That's right, Endeavor actually married. Surprised? I don't blame you. The bastard kept it private, and for good reason. It was a quirk marriage. He paid my mother's family a hefty sum to marry their daughter, all because of her quirk. She had a strong ice quirk, a complement to his own. And he wanted to have a child with her who would have a perfect mix of the two. The perfect quirk to realize his goal of surpassing All Might. Dabi grinned wider. That's it, kid. Expose him. The first child was a failure, or so I'm told. Tuyo was his name, but I never knew him much. Supposedly, his quirk gave him flames hotter than Endeavor's, but a resistance to cold. The second child, my sister Fuyumi, was also a failure, possessing an ice quirk. The third child, my brother Natsuo, was deemed the biggest failure of all. If you looked into his records, hard to find as they may be, you would say that he possesses a temperature resistance quirk. You'd be wrong. Natsuo is entirely quirkless, but Endeavor would be damned if word got out that he'd fathered a null. Dabi chuckled as the bastard's secrets were finally revealed for the world to hear. Yes, drag him, ruin him. When I was born, Endeavor was ecstatic. The even split of white and red hair, signifying the perfect quirk he dreamed of. When it manifested at age 4, that was when my training began. Day in and day out it was always, Shudo burn hotter. Shudo burn faster. Shudo be better. I was sick of it. Dabi leaned forward, grinning wider. Come on, kid. Keep going. My mother didn't fare very well. Seeing Endeavor constantly driving his oldest and youngest children to exhaustion through overtraining, while simultaneously ignoring his other two children, it strained her. You may wonder why you've never heard of her. Well, that's probably because she's been locked in a mental hospital ever since I was 6. Why? Because, in her deranged state, she mistook me for my father and poured boiling water over the left side of my face. I asked Endeavor where my mother was. He said that he'd sent her away for hurting me. I got angry with him. I blamed him for her actions. I was right, of course, but he would never agree with that. After all, how could the most powerful fire hero ever be wrong? Preposterous. So, the training continued. My older brother died by burning himself alive with his own quirk. Dabi winced. The training only got harsher. I got into the hero course at UA through the recommendations exam, but Endeavor wasn't happy. Why? Because I was 5th in line for consideration. The only reason I was accepted was because one of the top 4 had declined his offer. As my schooling continued, Endeavor only became more displeased. I kept getting outdone in academics and hero exercises by my inferior classmates. I didn't win the sports festival, not even getting to the tournament. Throughout my internship, I was disrespectful for refusing the fire he'd gifted me. You think Endeavor's harsh as a hero? Well, he's even worse to his kids. Of course, as time went on, he got worse. My failures only fueled his annoyance, which came back at me tenfold. It became an endless cycle of pain. I came into school with bruises and aches which adversely affected my performance, and my poor performance irritated Endeavor, which only made his training over the weekends harsher. Harsher training meant more bruises and aches, which meant poorer performance, which caused even harsher training, and so on. You can probably see how that might wear a person down. The final straw was during my practical exam yesterday. My worthless partner kept insisting on trying to hold me back by strategizing and working together. Shudo spat on the floor below the camera. Disgusting. She should have learned her place and stayed on the sidelines, rather than get in the way of actually strong people. It's pathetic how UA deemed her the top student of 1A over people who far outclassed her in strength. Kriati, the everything heroine, my ass. She's a nobody. A weakling taking the place of someone far stronger. Dabi frowned. Okay, that's going a little far. I can respect dissing Endeavor, but this, evidently, Eraserhead agreed, because the hero's eyes were blazing with rage. Shudo continued. Of course, the heroes didn't appreciate me getting rid of dead weight, going on about attacking your partner and learning teamwork. Please, I don't need anyone else. I've had enough. Endeavor wants me to improve, to be better, to burn brighter? Fine. The teen's left side burst into flames, melting a circle of ice around his feet. Then I'll burn, alright? I'll burn my way up the ranks of the heroes, one by one until Endeavor is forced to confront me. And then, I'll finally exact my revenge. Do you hear me? Number 2? All the heroes that die to me, all the civilians that get in the way, they will be on your head. He raised his flaming left arm. The ice hero Hyuga is no more. Now, I am Terminus, the burning death of all heroes. There was a burst of steam, and when it faded, Shudo was nowhere to be seen. Dabi swore under his breath. He's taking it even farther than I did. Sure, kill the old man, but don't drag others into it on purpose. He reached for his phone, only for the door to his room to slam open. Glancing over, he saw Shigaraki standing in the doorway. What do you want, fuckhands McGee? You're the kid's brother, right? Tuya? Dabi's eyes widened. How the fuck? Shiggy rolled his eyes. Please, everything matches up. Your age, your quirk, your hatred of Endeavor. I'm not a fucking idiot. Dabi sighed. Fine, so I used to be Tuya. So what? So, you've got to find him and keep him out of trouble. Dabi raised an eyebrow. He's already got the perfect quirk, and you think he needs me to protect him? If anything, he'll need more than just you. Now that Sensei knows that the kid's not under UA's protection, there's nothing stopping him from taking your brother's quirk, especially if he offers the kid a different quirk in exchange. Dabi swore under his breath. Damn it. And he just broadcasted his entire game plan, which means every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to know how to find him. Besides, from what you've told me, I don't like the idea of your sensei with Shudo's quirk. Shiggy nodded. Forget waiting to see where Sensei's plan is going. I'm breaking my code and getting the fuck out of here. Stain's probably coming with, since he doesn't trust Sensei either. Dabi huffed. You better not be planning on leaving me behind, asshole. Izuku stared at the TV, now turned off after Todoroki's message. Damn it all. He glanced over at where Momo was laying in a hospital bed, bandages wrapped around her stomach and a breathing mask over her face. The heart monitor beeped rhythmically, and her vitals were steady, but low. Bad luck, I guess. He probably would have snapped at anyone, and you just happened to be the closest person to lash out at. The door swung open, and Aizawa-sensei walked in, still bundled up after Todoroki's hijacking of the press conference. Midoriya, I'm surprised you're still here. Izuku chuckled weakly. What? Can't I be worried about my vice rep? Aizawa-sensei shrugged. Fair. I just wasn't expecting you to be this worried. Or be away from your little gang for this long. The hero snorted at Izuku's shocked expression. Seriously? The 8 of you are together at literally every opportunity. It'd be hard not to notice. Izuku sighed. I guess that's fair. He looked back at Momo. It's just, I feel like I should have done more. Aizawa-sensei raised an eyebrow. You're the main reason she's alive. Don't you think that's enough? Izuku shook his head. I knew something wasn't right with Todoroki. If I'd spoken my mind earlier, maybe it wouldn't have fallen to this. Maybe Momo would still be conscious, and Todoroki wouldn't have gone villain. Aizawa-sensei hummed and sat down in one of the chairs in the room, legs crossed. During the press conference, Nedzu said that we'd be taking our students' mental health far more seriously. Part of that is mandatory therapy appointments with Hound Dog for everyone who went through the USJ attack. That probably goes double for you, considering you were the most involved out of the entire class. And that's not even mentioning the kind of shit that Aldera crammed in your head. Izuku huffed and turned towards the window. I don't know what you're talking about. Aldera's gone, and I've long since realized that they were full of shit. It's no use thinking about that hellhole anymore. Aizawa-sensei grunted. Aha, take it from a former bullied kid. That stuff never gets out of your head that easily. Took me years of pent-up aggression before Hisashi forcefully befriended me and made me confront my issues. Besides, every hero worth a damn knows that there's no point in worrying about what-ifs or maybes. You do what you can with what life gives you. And sometimes it's a shit hand, but you've got to deal with it. Izuku sighed. I call this a pretty shit hand. One classmate in a coma. Another classmate now a villain. And the class rep could have prevented it all if he'd gotten over his apparent trust issues when it comes to adults. Aizawa-sensei huffed. Honestly, going off the footage that Mamoto snagged from Aldera's security cameras, I'd be more surprised if you didn't have issues with trusting adults. I'm sure that your homeroom teacher tried her best, but trauma like that sticks in your brain harder than duct tape. Izuku raised an eyebrow. You know me, Wakaru-san? Aizawa-sensei nodded. Cousin. Having quirks related to other quirks is kind of a thing in my generation of the family. I think I have a half-brother living in China who powers up a person's quirk by looking at them. But yeah, actually, she's the reason why your junior high got shut down at all. She was the one who started the investigation, and I was only in on it because she requested my involvement. Izuku sighed. I suppose I owe her a thank you. Not only did she give me a quirk to call my own, but she shut down my shitty junior high. Just wish she'd done the same for the elementary school, since they gave me shit for considerably longer. Aizawa-sensei chuckled. I guess you didn't pay attention to the news. Nedzu ended up raising both the elementary and high schools mere weeks after the junior high, since he had suspicions that the entire system was corrupt. Mamoto blowing the whistle was the spark that started the bonfire. Izuku sighed with relief. Good to hear. Some of the teachers at the elementary school were utterly horrible. Aizawa-sensei stood up and walked forward, laying a hand on Izuku's shoulder. In the future, if you have even the barest hunch that something might be wrong with a fellow student, let me know. I promise I'll do my best to look into it. Hell, let me know if you think something might be wrong with you. I can't have my problem child, let alone the class representative, floundering on his own. Izuku grinned. Thanks, sensei. It's nice to know that there's someone who'll back me up. Aizawa-sensei snorted. I think the whole class would back you up, no matter what it was that you were planning. Tashinori nervously approached Nedzu's office, and his anxiety only grew as the double doors swung open on their own. The mammal was sitting behind his desk, sipping at a cup of tea. Ah, Tashinori-san. Please, come in. Tashinori complied, sitting in the chair in front of the desk and cautiously accepting the cup of tea handed his way. Knowing Nedzu's odd behaviors, he took a sip, internally wondering about the chosen flavor. After a few seconds of silence, he set the cup down on the desk and took a deep breath. I've run into an issue regarding my successor. Nedzu hummed, the fur above one eye rising in an attempt to convey a raised eyebrow. And what might that issue be? Well, I was considering passing my quirk to one of the recommended students, Todoroki Shounen or Yaoyorozu Shoujo. But recent events have forced you to reconsider, the mammal finished. Tashinori nodded and looked down at his clasped hands in his lap. Now that Todoroki Shounen has become a villain, I cannot in good faith consider him as a potential successor. Yaoyorozu Shoujo would make a fine wielder of one for all, but her current condition makes it difficult to receive her consent. However, even if the events of the final exam had not occurred, I would still be reconsidering my choices. Nedzu hummed. And why is that? Because All for One is evidently not as dead as I thought he was. The mammal made a gesture for Tashinori to continue. I thought that I had killed him during our battle 6 years ago. Yet, ever since Shigaraki bragged that his Nomu had multiple quirks, I had begun to consider if I had failed. And now that I think back on what has transpired, I think it is most likely that All for One did indeed survive, and is the mastermind behind the League of Villains. Nedzu sighed and took another sip of tea. Troubling indeed. Still, after you were injured by young Todoroki, you cannot muster your muscle form for even a full minute. As you are, you cannot possibly hope to face All for One by yourself. We must consider the possibility that the duty will fall to your successor. Tashinori went pale. And how would we be certain that All for One would wait long enough for my successor to be ready? Not only must we find a suitable wielder after Togata Shounen refused, but we would need to train them enough to receive the quirk, then make sure that they could properly use it. We do not have that time. Nedzu hummed, before setting his cup of tea down on its saucer. In that case, we have no other option. We must inform Eraserhead. Toshinori swallowed. Is that wise? The more people that know of this, the more people that are in danger. You know this, sir. Nedzu nodded. That is true. Having All for One as an enemy is incredibly dangerous. But you must also consider that simply being a hero is just as dangerous, if not more so. The profession already paints a target on its members' backs, and drawing All for One's ire does little to increase that target. Besides, when facing an enemy who relies on quirks, it is no doubt useful to have an ally who can disable quirks. No. Toshinori shook his head. Defeating All for One is the duty of the wielder of One for All. This is my fight, and my fight alone. Nedzu sighed. Toshinori, that line of thinking nearly killed young Ida. What makes you think it would serve you any better? Toshinori froze, the color draining from his face as the truth set in. The mammal continued. If anything, you are the only one who should not be part of this fight. With your injuries, you would be more of a hindrance than a help. Yes, you could certainly provide your experience, but as things stand, we do not possess a reliable method of wielding the strength of One for All in this battle. Toshinori nodded weakly. I understand, sir. In that case, what should we do? Nedzu opened his mouth to respond, only to pause when his computer beeped. That's odd. I wasn't expecting any visitors at this time. Who could be at the front gate? The mammal pulled up the security feed on his monitor, and his eyes grew wide. Toshinori carefully walked around behind the desk, and he immediately understood. Tamura grunted as he was shoved into a chair in an interrogation room, Quirk-suppressing handcuffs on his wrists. Geez, you really know how to treat your guests, huh? Eraserhead glared down at him. Why should we believe you? For all we know, this could be a ploy to get you within UA's walls to take us down from the inside. Tamura sighed. Kurogiri. File. The misty bartender nodded, reaching into his coat and retrieving the manila folder they'd assembled before leaving the bar. He laid it open on the table and slid it over to the hero. If you are skeptical, call your employer. He will verify that this information is accurate. Nedzu dropped out of a vent in the ceiling, immediately striding over and hopping up onto the chair to get a good view of the folder. No need to call me. I'm already here. He quickly skimmed through the visible pages, tail twitching with every line. After a few seconds, the mammal closed the folder and clasped his paws, setting them on the table. Well, it seems your information is indeed accurate. May I ask why you're defecting? Tamura huffed. Sensei's a bastard who made me kill my family by giving me an uncontrollable quirk. Then he tried to brainwash me into being a tool of death and destruction. I was never his successor, just another pawn on his weird-ass chessboard. Dabi grunted. I was only a villain to piss off Endeavor. Then my kid brother did the same thing, only he made himself a huge target for both sides, and I don't want to sit back and let him lose his life or his quirk. Kurogiri sighed. I do not even know who or what I am anymore. Tamura grunted. Slap some quirk-canceling things on him. Should get rid of the mist over his face. Eraserhead nodded at the detective guy standing in the corner of the room, who walked forward and produced another pair of quirk-suppressing handcuffs. Kurogiri obediently stuck his wrists out, and the detective clicked them shut, immediately stepping back. Kurogiri twitched, and the fog faded away to reveal dead eyes, cloudy white hair, and a surprisingly small body. Eraserhead breathed in sharply, his face looking like he'd seen a ghost. No, it can't be. I saw your corpse. Tamura huffed. Either he's a Nomu made from a dead body, or he wasn't as dead as you thought. Eraserhead grabbed Tamura's hair. Is it reversible? Tamura grunted with pain. I don't fucking know. I'm not the fucker who makes the damn things. The hero's grip tightened. Then who does? Stop trying to pull my fucking head off and I'll tell you. Nedzu raised a paw. Shudakuin, let go of him. Violence will not solve anything here. Eraserhead let go of Tamura's hair, breathing heavily as the detective removed the cuffs from Kurogiri, letting the mist cover his face. Tamura took a deep breath, popping his neck before sitting back in his chair. I don't know his real name, but Sensei calls him the Doctor. He's old, almost as old as Sensei. He's a total whack job, completely obsessed with his pet projects and obeying Sensei's every whim. He never leaves the secret HQ, and I don't know where it is. Probably some kind of hospital, since he loves masquerading as a kid's doctor to sniff out potentially attractive quirks to steal or use for Nomu. Nedzu hummed worriedly. Do you have a physical description? Tamura nodded, reaching forward and flicking through the file folder on the table. Kinda short, bushy white mustache, bald head, and he always wears funky yellow goggles that look like gears. Eraserhead grunted, scanning the file on the doctor. You might not know his real name, but do you know any aliases he might have used? The more info we have on this guy, the better. Dabi hummed. I think he might have used Mizutofu General Hospital as a scouting position about 10 to 15 years back. Player 2 poked his head in the room. Did somebody say Mizutofu General Hospital? Eraserhead glanced at the kid. Problem child. What are you doing here? Player 2 huffed, walking into the room and looking at Tamura. Figured you might want someone who speaks his language, and maybe another head to bounce ideas off of. He glanced down at the file on the doctor, and he raised an eyebrow. Bald, bushy mustache and goggles? Sounds a lot like Dr. Tsubasa to me. Nedzu hummed. You knew him? Player 2 groaned. Knew him. Loathed him for a good 6 years. The bastard misdiagnosed me as Quirkless. That, and his grandson was one of my primary bullies during elementary school, up until he vanished between 3rd and 4th year. Wonder what happened to him. Tamura hummed. Grandson, eh? Did the kid happen to have some kind of wing-based quirk? Player 2 raised an eyebrow. Yeah, he had bat wings, but he was a chunky little shit, so he never could fly all that well. Why? Tamura sighed. I think the doctor turned the kid into a Nomu. One of the ones he gave us for Hosu, actually. The yellow one with the gas mask. The old fart was always proud of that one. Something about a personal connection or some shit. Player 2 went pale. That's just sick. Tamura nodded. He really is. Bastard never calls anyone by their name, only by their quirk. It's the only thing he cares about, aside from sensei. Player 2 huffed. If he cared so much about quirks, then why did he have a history of false diagnoses? According to the doctor that looked at me when I was older, Dr. Tsubasa would always say that a person's quirk was much weaker than it actually turned out to be. Tamura grunted. Probably did that so they'd be easier for sensei to steal. Player 2's eyes widened. Your sensei can steal quirks? Eraserhead rounded on the kid. Midoriya, you are not participating in this. Player 2 held up a hand. Relax. I'm not planning on fighting this guy. Seems way out of my league. But I'm curious about his quirk. How does he steal quirks? Is he limited to only certain types? Is there a maximum number he can have at one time? Can the quirks be given to other people? Tamura hummed. Physical contact, no, not that I know of, and yes, though more than 3 quirks in a single person generally makes them go brain dead. That's where the lower tier nomus come from. High-end nomus either have fewer quirks, or their quirks merge together so they put less strain on the brain or something. I don't know shit about quirk science. Player 2 rubbed at his chin. Hypothetically speaking, if he stole a quirk that stockpiles something, would he gain the thing stockpiled in it, or would he have to start from scratch? Tamura grunted. Not sure, haven't talked to him about something like that. Plus, I think he'd get suspicious if I started asking specific questions like that. He doesn't like me having a high intelligence stat. Kurogiri spoke up. Speaking of being suspicious, I believe it would be in our best interests to return to the base soon. If he noticed our absence, it likely would not end well. Eraserhead grunted. True, we might be able to keep him from warping straight in, but that won't stop him from appearing right outside and bulldozing his way in, especially if he's got hundreds of quirks at his beck and call. Tamura huffed. More like thousands, but yeah, we'll see what we can do about sharing more information, but for now, we'll leave you to plan. He glanced at Player 2. Don't die, brat. You're the most fun I've had in ages. Player 2 grinned back at him. 2 players are much better than 1, I'll give you that. Though, I've always preferred PvE over PvP. Tamura gave a short bark of laughter. Agree to disagree, but there's nothing saying we can't party up on occasion. Dabi glanced over as the door to the bar slammed open. His eyes widened as Shudo stomped in, wearing nothing but the tattered remains of his hero costume. What the hell do I have to do to get someone to fight me? It's been a good week since that press conference, and not a single hero has come for me yet. It's like they don't even care. The teenager plopped down on one of the bar stools and grunted. Gimme something, Kurogiri hummed. I do not serve alcohol to minors. Shudo quirked an eyebrow, frost spreading across his right side. Really? A hotspot for all manner of illegal scum? And you care about the legal drinking age? Dabi huffed and walked over, sitting next to his brother. Some of us like to cling to something legal or moral. Personally, I make it a policy to not hit bystanders. They didn't ask to get dragged into my shit, so I leave them alone. Shudo grunted. If they get hit, it's their fault for being in the way. They should know better than to be near a fight. Dabi raised an eyebrow. You're making this too easy, kid, but since I'm feeling generous, I won't go for the low-hanging fruit. Kurogiri huffed. And because I'd rather not have the bar destroyed. Dabi chuckled. And that? Shudo swiveled in his seat to glare at Dabi. You sound familiar. Familiar and annoying. Who are you? Dabi crossed his arms. I go by Dabi. I'm known for my grudge against the number 2 asshole. Haven't gotten a chance to face the big guy myself, but I figure it's only a matter of time. Shudo grunted and turned back to the bar. Don't get in my way. Endeavor is mine to kill. Dabi sighed and grabbed Shudo by the arm, yanking him off the stool and dragging him up the stairs to his private room. As soon as the door shut, Dabi released him and turned around, falling backwards to land on his bed. Come on, Sho. Let your big brother get a piece of the action. Shudo huffed. You're not Natsuo. Why should I care? Dabi sighed and stood up, walking over to the sink in his room and grabbing the bottle of dye remover. He stuck his head in the bowl and emptied the bottle over his head, watching the black dye run down the drain. He stood upright, looking at his snow-white hair in the mirror. Behind him, he saw Shudo stare at him without a hint of understanding. Dabi sighed. You really forgot about your training, buddy? I'm hurt, Sho. Shudo scoffed. So you just happen to look like Tuya. That doesn't prove anything. He died years ago. Dabi turned around and leaned back against the sink, setting the bottle of dye remover down next to the faucet. He held up one hand, and blue fire burst to life in his palm. Not quite. After a few seconds, he hissed in pain and cut the fire off, wincing as smoke rose from his freshly burned palm. Shoto's eyes widened, then narrowed. So you survived. Why the hell didn't you come back? Dabi huffed and sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall. I'd had enough. I wanted out, and being assumed dead gave me an exit plan. Can't risk showing my face at the house when the old man might see me, though I think Mom knows I'm not dead. I haven't exactly been subtle, since I keep leaving her favorite flowers in a jar on her windowsill. Fuyumi seems convinced, but I think Natsuo is skeptical. Shoto grunted. So, you've seen Mother recently? Dabi raised an eyebrow. What, you haven't? Shoto scoffed. I wanted to. The bastard always told me no. Said I couldn't afford to be distracted by her. Dick. Dabi nodded. Definitely. Though you're being a dumbass. Shoto scowled, right side frosting over. Excuse me? Your grudge is with Endeavor, right? So why drag everyone else into your little tantrum? Shoto huffed. Well, focusing solely on annoying Endeavor like you've been doing clearly isn't enough to get his attention. So I'm gonna carve a path through Japan right into his face. I'll destroy everything, until he's forced to confront me, and then I'll take my revenge. Maybe if there's anything left of him once I'm done, then you can extract your own pound of flesh from his carcass. Dabi scoffed. Aha, and if that was your plan, then how come I haven't seen much burning recently? For that matter, why come here? Shoto grunted. I've made attempts. I put up ice spikes in various parts of Mizutofu as bait, but nobody really paid them any attention. Just left them there until they melted on their own. I needed to get the attention of the heroes, and these people are in their crosshairs. What better way to get noticed than to be near the infamous League of Villains? Dabi crossed his arms. So, you're planning to join up? Shoto let out a short bark of laughter. Don't be ridiculous. I don't need anyone else. They just drag me down. I'm just using the hero's watch on the League to get them to notice me by proximity. Once I've got their attention, I fully intend to work on my own. Dabi huffed. Aha. Like that's ever worked out great for anyone. Shoto raised an eyebrow. Seems to work for All Might. Dabi scoffed. He only gets away with it because he can level city blocks without breaking a sweat. Endeavor always preaches about not needing help. And yet he drags the flaming psychic curse with him just about everywhere. Admit it, he may be a bastard, but he's not an idiot. He knows his weaknesses, so he hires sidekicks that can help cover those areas. Shoto huffed. I don't have weaknesses. I have the perfect balance of fire and ice. Dabi grunted. Aha, go challenge Eraserhead on your own and see how well that works out for you. Shoto got up from the floor. Fine, I will. He'll be the first to die. And if his students try to get in my way, then they'll fall just like their teacher. Izuku waved out the window at Mom standing in the parking lot, as the bus drove through a gate in the barrier of UA that immediately closed behind them. As they headed off towards their destination, Izuku turned around and slumped down in his seat. While the class would normally be extremely chatty, the bus was silent, thanks in large part to the two distinctly empty seats. Todoroki's attack and Momo's condition were at the forefront of everyone's minds, bringing down the mood substantially. Izuku sat by the window and stared out at the passing scenery, and he couldn't help but think about how things might have been different if just a few things had changed. Maybe if Todoroki had gotten to the tournament round, Endeavor wouldn't have been as pissed and wouldn't have pushed Todoroki as hard. Maybe if he'd gone with someone else for his internship, he'd have gotten a break from training and calmed down enough that he would have been cooperative during his final exam. Maybe if I'd swallowed my anxiety and fucking spoken up, he would have gotten the help he needed earlier and Momo wouldn't be in a goddamn coma. There was a light chop to the top of his head, and he glanced away from the window to see Katsuki standing in the aisle with his arms crossed. I could feel you self-deprecating from the front of the bus. Cut it out, you'll only make yourself feel worse. Izuku grunted and turned back to stare out the window. That's a tall order, considering how bad I already feel. How the hell can I call myself a class rep if I can't bring myself to open up about possible issues with my classmates? Katsuki huffed. You're being a dumbass. Izuku whipped around to glare at him, but Katsuki's expression didn't waver. You heard me. You're so busy beating yourself up about what could have happened, you're not thinking about what will happen. Shit went down. That's life. Now suck it up and start preparing for what's gonna happen next. Yeah. Izuku sighed and took a deep breath, letting a small grin slip onto his face. Thanks, Kat. You always know how to put things in perspective. Katsuki grinned. Not a problem. A couple hours later, the bus slid to a stop on a cliffside overlooking the forest below. Normally, the class would have been muttering about the sudden stop, but with everything that had happened, they were on guard the minute their feet hit the dirt. Once everyone was off the bus, a nondescript black car emerged from around the bend, coming to a stop right by the bus. The back door on the passenger side opened, and Izuku's eyes widened as he recognized the two heroines that stepped out. Ha! Wasn't expecting half of the wild pussycats. Shako nodded. Probably my favorite hero team, to be honest. Normally, I'd be fangirling, but something doesn't feel right. Izuku grunted. On instinct, he turned to ask Momo's opinion of the situation, only to suddenly remember that she was still in a coma back at UA's infirmary. The self-loathing returned in full force, and he nearly missed Mandalay saying, "You'll be staying at our summer lodge over at the base of that mountain." The pieces fell into place. The entire class exchanged glances, before falling into a series of rudimentary stretches. Pixie Bob hummed in approval. Good instincts. Heroes have to always be ready for anything. Multiple glares were sent her way, and Aizawa-sensei winced. Maybe he's up on lines like that. Todoroki snapped because he wasn't allowed to rest, so they're a bit on edge at the moment. Mandalay hummed in sympathy. Gotcha. I'll let Ragdoll and Tiger know once the kids get moving. Izuku raised his arms high and leaned back, feeling his various joints pop in succession. Right? 1A, listen up. I'm temporarily appointing Katsuki as vice rep. If I'm not around to give orders, look to him. Got it. He nodded at the various sounds of confirmation. Good. Let's get moving. As one, the class charged towards the rail lining the cliff edge and jumped over, sliding down the steep incline towards the forest floor below. Once their feet hit the grass, they were off, weaving through the trees and tossing out observations and advice. The earth shook, and a huge beast rose up from the ground. Immediately, Katsuki blasted in and blew it into clumps of dirt. Pixie Bob's quirk. Don't let your guards down. Right. Class 1A limped into the clearing about 4.5 hours after leaving the bus. Mandalay clapped appreciatively and walked forward from where she had been standing by the doors to the main lodge. Impressive. We were expecting you to take 6 hours at best. Aizawa-sensei huffed. They've seen firsthand how dangerous their opponents can be. They've been pushing themselves, and the absence of their 2 classmates only spurred them harder. Pixie Bob made an imitation of a purring noise. How sweet. Do I sense a potential mate in one of them? She glanced over at Izuku and licked her lips. Izuku made a groaning noise, and Kyuka glared daggers at the heroine, stomping over and jumping onto Izuku's back. He immediately brought his arms around to hold her up. Taken. Pixie's gaze shifted to Katsuki, and the blonde snorted. Gay, and fucking proud of it. She looked at Hitoshi, who scoffed. Terminally gay. Kirishima coughed into his fist. Pan? But I'd rather aim for someone my age. Kaminari gestured at himself. Does this not scream disaster gay? Ida sighed. I believe I am asexual. Besides, I would rather not get into a relationship with an adult. That would be quite awkward. Aoyama stuck his arm out and let the hand flop down. Satu rubbed at his neck and pulled out a cupcake keychain with the asexual pride flag as the wrapper. Shuji coughed into his fist and subtly pointed at Satu's keychain. Most of the other boys followed suit. Dark Shadow appeared from under Fumicage's shirt, pointed at their host with one hand, and mimicked Aoyama's gesture with the other. Kuda hastily signed. I'm straight, but I'd rather be with someone less loud. Pixie Bob sighed in defeat. Fine. Maybe someone in 1B. Aizawa-sensei groaned and dragged a hand down his face. Ryuko, drop it. They're kids. If you really want to date someone so badly, ask Namiri for help. I know for a fact she'd be more than willing to. He turned to the rest of the class. Get inside. There's a split hot spring, so freshen up. We have a packed curriculum planned for this week, and we'd like to get things going as soon as possible. The class slowly filed into the main lodge, lured by the promise of soaking in hot water. A kid with a horned red hat stood by and watched with a scowl on his face. Stupid heroes. That's the 10-part finished. If you want to catch up on the earlier chapters, head to the playlist. Please remember to support the author. I'll be back with more soon. Thanks for being awesome.